No one in the shop ever remembered when the engine first arrived, only that it had always been there, crouched in the far corner like a wounded animal nobody wanted to touch. It sat on a rust-stained pallet under a flickering tube light, its casing scratched with old chalk marks, grease-smudged warnings, and one word written in block letters that never fully rubbed off: impossible. Mechanics passed it every day, shaking their heads, some muttering jokes, others pretending not to see it at all. The engine had a reputation. 3 senior engineers had failed to bring it to life. One had quit. Another had sworn never to work industrial again. By the time people stopped trying, the label wasn't an insult anymore, it was a conclusion. And yet, every evening after his shift officially ended, Daniel Reyes stood in front of it in silence, sleeves rolled, hands still, eyes scanning metal like it might speak back if he listened hard enough. Daniel never told anyone why he stayed late. He didn't complain about the extra hours or the unpaid work. He didn't explain why he skipped dinner breaks or why his lunchbox was always half full when he took it home. The truth was heavier than small talk. At home, a 6-year-old boy waited at a wobbly kitchen table doing homework by the glow of a single bulb. At home, bills sat unopened because looking at numbers didn't change them. At home, there was no second income, no backup plan, no margin for failure. Daniel had learned long ago that noise didn't fix anything. Silence did. Silence let him think. Silence let him survive. The engine had arrived from a defense subcontractor, stripped of context and dumped into the workshop with a vague note: fails under thermal load, diagnosis inconclusive. That was all. No schematics. No error logs. Just a machine that overheated, seized, and died every time it crossed a certain threshold. Most people attacked it aggressively, replaced parts, rewired sections, forced simulations. Daniel didn't. He cleaned it first. Every bolt. Every surface. He wiped years of frustration off the metal until he could see what others had missed: hairline discoloration near the rear manifold, stress patterns that didn't match the load charts. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was subtle. And subtle problems didn't respond to brute force. They responded to patience. Night after night, Daniel listened. He turned the crank by hand, feeling resistance shift by fractions of a millimeter. He heated sections slowly, watching expansion with the focus of a man who couldn't afford to be wrong. His phone buzzed sometimes: school reminders, late notices, the soft panic of a life lived on deadlines, but he ignored it until his hands were clean and his thoughts were finished. At home, his son Mateo would already be asleep by the time Daniel returned, curled around a stuffed dinosaur missing one eye. Daniel always stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching the steady rise and fall of the boy's chest, letting that rhythm replace the chaos of the day. People noticed Daniel's dedication, but they misunderstood it. They thought he was trying to prove something, chasing recognition, maybe even hoping to get promoted. He wasn't. Promotions came with meetings, with politics, with time taken away from what mattered. Daniel didn't need applause. He needed solutions. The engine wasn't a challenge to his ego, it was a puzzle blocking the only road forward. If he could solve it, the contract would reopen. If the contract reopened, overtime would follow. If overtime followed, rent would get paid on time. The math was simple. The execution was not. One night, close to midnight, the security guard wandered past and joked that Daniel was trying to resurrect a corpse. Daniel smiled politely and said nothing. He had learned that explaining unfinished ideas invited doubt, and doubt was contagious. Instead, he scribbled notes in a battered notebook, diagrams drawn over grocery lists and school permission slips. The pattern was emerging slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. The engine wasn't failing because of heat alone. It was failing because of uneven heat, micro-expansions causing internal torque misalignment. The fix wasn't replacing parts. It was rebalancing tolerance in a way the original designers never considered, because they assumed ideal conditions. Real life was never ideal. At home, Matteo asked why other kids had moms at pickup and he didn't. Daniel knelt, chose his words carefully, and said some people leave, but some people stay twice as strong. Matteo accepted this with the unquestioning trust only children have. That trust weighed more than any engine ever could. Daniel carried it back to the workshop every morning like invisible armor. He didn't talk about it. He just worked harder. Weeks passed. Rumors started. Someone said Daniel was wasting company time. Someone else said management should shut him down. The word impossible got said again, louder this time, like a warning. Daniel heard it all and filtered it out. He had already seen something no one else had. The engine's flaw wasn't a failure of design, but of assumption. It was built for perfection, not reality. Daniel lived in reality. He knew how things warped under pressure. He knew how systems failed quietly before they failed loudly. He adjusted the internal mountings by a margin so small it felt like blasphemy. He rerouted a cooling channel, not to lower temperature, but to equalize it. The solution looked wrong on paper. It felt right in his hands. The first test run was a whisper. The engine spun. The gauges climbed. Everyone expected the familiar spike, the shudder, the death rattle. It didn't come. Instead, there was a steady hum, controlled, balanced, alive. Daniel didn't celebrate. He watched. He waited. Machines lied sometimes. Hope made people reckless. He pushed it further. Past the old limits. Past the failure point that had earned its label. The engine held. Still, Daniel said nothing. He shut it down, logged the data, and went home to make boxed macaroni for Matteo like nothing extraordinary had happened.